Welcome to Coffee with Jude. In this episode of memoir writing tips and inspirations, I'm going to talk about overcoming resistance, which can be the thing that keeps you from writing your book. I wrote about overcoming resistance in my book, South of Ordinary. This is a story of Dave and my journey through South America, backpacking journey. Let me read a little bit to you. In the hotel that night, we had just smoked some killer weed, compliments of our new German friends, when a rat-a-tat-tat sounded on the door. It had an urgent quality to it, like the repeated pops of gunfire. We looked at each other wide-eyed and scared, thinking, what now? I would answer the door since I was most presentable. Dave had long hippie hair, which brought suspicious druggy looks. My hair was long and blonde, appropriate for a girl, my skin fresh. I could flash a wide, toothy smile which often eased tension. By now, my Spanish was good enough to understand directions, answer most questions, and buy things at the market. I cracked open the door to find a uniformed official with a rifle dangling at his side. The blood pulsed in my ears. This would surely be the time we'd get busted. Not wanting the cop to smell the reefer, I quickly stepped into the hall and closed the door behind me. He was asking for passports. Sí, sí, señor. Un momento tengo. ¿Cómo está hoy día? I asked, trying to hide my nervous little self. Stalling would give the guys time to clean up in case the cop wanted to step inside. When my Spanish repertoire had expired, I held up my finger and said, Un momento. Then I backed myself up to the door, opened it swiftly, and shut it behind me so as not to let any smells escape to his nose. I was relieved to see that Dave and our friends had opened the windows and hidden the paraphernalia. Still, there was a whiff of the earthy smoke hanging in the air. He wants our passports, I said. We scrambled through our belongings to find the papers. I gathered them up and exited, snapping the door shut. I handed over the booklets. He leafed through each one, inspecting them for the Guatemala border stamp. Gracias, he said, as he handed them back to me. He wasn't coming in. He turned away and walked down the hall. Great waves of relief washed over me. I went back into our room, weak from adrenaline. Dave congratulated me for my masterful management of the situation. He saved us in Si Polite. Turnabout was fair play. Now you have to remember this was 1971, and we had heard stories of kids getting busted for pot and just living for eternity in jail. So it was a really risky thing to be smoking pot and carrying it around with us. Okay, so I'll carry on. This pot smoking was risky, but I couldn't consider quitting. We both got extremely crabby when we ran out. Weed made the papayas more vibrant and the unknowns of travel more palatable. I suppose I was medicating the boredom that resulted from lack of productivity. As I look back, I wonder if I had allowed myself to be more creative, I wouldn't have desired the pot so much. I knew even back then that creativity fills me up. I would have done well to write stories, paint nature scenes, or sew a dress or two. I did keep a journal, which was always fun to write in, and read the stories from weeks past. I remember having a yearning to create more, but I guess I'd rather be bored. Why? I have no clue. Stephen Pressfield, author of War of Art, would call this resistance. Yes, I had resistance, but I suppose it wasn't painful enough to cause me to do more about it. That's a curious question. When you know something is not good for you and you go ahead and do it, like eat that chocolate cake that you know is going to give you a stomach ache or make you sluggish, or do drugs when you know it's not good for your body. So we're going to talk about overcoming the resistance that keeps you from sitting down in the chair and writing your memoir or writing stories. It's a common problem, and I would like to share with you my struggles with it and some of the tools that I have found that help to alleviate some of this resistance. I hate to make a big deal about this, but it really is a real thing, this resistance. It seems like every day before I sit down to write, there's like almost like a membrane that I have to break through to make myself sit down and write. And I don't know what this is, but Stephen Pressfield says in his book War of Art that there's a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't know, and that is that the hard part about writing is not the writing, but sitting down to write. And I think that's true. Once I sit down to write, the words often just come and flow. Sometimes I have a good day writing. Sometimes I have a bad day writing. But the important thing is that I'm writing, because unless you actually sit down and write, your book never gets done. And you don't really need to know where you're going or have a huge plan ahead or think that you have to do more research. Just start writing. That's the most important thing. Now, I've learned a couple tools to help me get over this resistance. The most important thing to do is to establish a writing practice, a regular time when you make an appointment with yourself and you don't break it, but you sit down and you write. So what I like to do is first thing in the morning, I get a cup of coffee and I write in my journal, and then I write for an hour or two on my project or my book that I'm working on. I think if you kind of leave it up to when you are going to have a inspiration, or you really feel like writing, or when you know what you want to say, it might never happen. So just this routine of practice, setting up a writing practice, will make a huge difference. Like Isaac Newton says, what you set in motion stays in motion. When I was writing Sunlight on My Shadow, I had this secret that was heavy on my heart that I had kept for many years. And I just had this urge or this nudge or a grace maybe that nudged me to write. So I sat down, I started with the story of when my father dropped me off at the home for unwed mothers, and he took each of my books and he crossed my last name out. So I would be known from now on at the home for unwed mothers as Judy L, because I was pregnant and I was going to be giving up my baby for adoption, and it was to be kept a secret. We told everyone I had a kidney disease. So I just wrote that story, and I remember the look of the home being brick with all the steps going up, the high steps, and it was a real pretty summer day, and I felt like I was going to jail. But as I wrote that story, tears flowed, and it felt so good to write my story, this secret that I had never told anyone. And then the next day I got up and I read what I had written, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't let anyone read this. I would just cringe with embarrassment. I thought about my daughters reading it or my brothers, and thought, what would they think? Why would they think I should be drudging up these old past things that are so shameful? And so the words dried up. I couldn't keep on writing. A couple days later, I still wanted to write. And so I thought, well, I will just write this story without anyone ever reading it. I'll just write it for myself. I'll just get it down. And so that was a way that I could overcome that resistance, that self-consciousness that makes you not be able to find your voice. And that worked. That was beautiful, because I was able to get rid of the judgment and what other people might think and just write my story. Yes, it's so good to be at the beach. It's nice to have a change of scenery. I've been in that apartment for hours. I love what Elizabeth Gilbert says in her Facebook post entitled 10-Step Writing Academy. She says, every write starts in the same place on day one. Super excited and ready for greatness. On day two, every writer looks at what she wrote on day one and hates herself. What separates working writers from non-working writers is that working writers return to their task on day three. What gets you there is not pride, but mercy. Show yourself forgiveness for not being good enough, then keep going.